What if Ned Stark had opened his eyes not to the grey skies of Winterfell, but to the roar of dragons and the scent of ash? The world around him trembled. His heart pounded like a war drum. One moment he had been in the crypts beneath his home alone, reflecting on old ghosts and broken oaths. The next, there was a blinding light, a tearing sensation in his chest, and then this. Hot winds, a black sky, and 3 shadows above him, circling like death itself. He tried to stand, but staggered. The ground was scorched and dry. A city burned in the distance, and above it all a black-winged beast screamed like vengeance. But it wasn't just the beast. It was the man riding it. A man with silver hair, black armor, and eyes that burned with fire and purpose. Ned Stark had heard tales of him. Every child in Westeros had. Aegon Targaryen, the Conqueror. And now, somehow, he was real. Wait, did you hear that? Because yeah, what you're thinking is exactly right. Eddard Stark, honor-bound Warden of the North, just fell face first into the era of dragons and fire, smack in the middle of Aegon's first war. But hold on, it gets even crazier. Ned didn't speak at first. His training as a soldier, a man of the North, kept him still. Observe, survive, learn. The dragon landed with a force that shook the stones beneath his feet. The rider dismounted slowly. Tall, regal, impossibly calm for a man who'd just burned a castle to the ground. His violet eyes found Ned instantly. "Who are you to stand here and not burn?" the Targaryen asked, sword still unsheathed. Ned's hand went instinctively to where ice should be. It wasn't there. Of course it wasn't. What good was a sword in the face of a beast that spat fire and a man who tamed it? "I am Eddard Stark," he said at last, his voice dry. "Of Winterfell." Aegon tilted his head. "Never heard of it." And just like that, the world shifted again. Winterfell didn't exist, not yet. The Starks were barely even known outside the North. Honor, duty, oaths, none of it meant anything here, not yet. Ned was a ghost from the future, standing in a world that had only just begun to carve its legend into stone. And the man before him. He wasn't just a Targaryen. He was the Targaryen. But why did this matter? Because Ned Stark, the man who had fought wars, survived betrayals, and died for the truth, had just entered a time before it all. And this wasn't just some accidental trip through time. No, this was a test of fate. A disruption so massive that every prophecy, every throne, every drop of blood to be spilled in Westeros now hung in the balance. Let's pause here for a second. Did anyone else just get chills? Because if Ned Stark influences Aegon the Conqueror, if he becomes part of that story, then everything we know about Westeros changes. Everything. Aegon narrowed his eyes. "You wear the look of a soldier, but not of any kingdom I've burned." Ned, ever the strategist, bowed slightly. "Not in submission. In diplomacy. I serve the realm," he lied. "I was injured in battle, lost my company. I seek shelter." That was true in a way. He had lost everyone. Catelyn, Robb, even Jon, especially Jon. And now he was here in the past, with nothing but ghosts and grit to protect him. Aegon gestured to a group of soldiers nearby. Tall, golden-armored men with Valyrian steel in their hands and no mercy in their eyes. "Take him to the keep. If he's lying, feed him to Balerion." Ned didn't resist. He needed time, information, answers. 3 days passed. In that time, he learned more about the beginning of Aegon's conquest than any maester's tome had ever dared describe. He watched as villages surrendered without blood, as lords bent the knee in fear of fire. But he also saw something else. Aegon wasn't just burning for power. He was building something, a unified realm. Third dream. Ned couldn't help but compare him to Robert, to Cersei, to Daenerys. Was Aegon truly the beginning of the Targaryen madness, or had time twisted his legacy into something it wasn't? Okay, but this is where things start to twist in ways you wouldn't believe. On the 4th day, Aegon summoned Ned personally. The hall was vast, dark and quiet except for the crackle of dragonfire in the distance. "You're no ordinary soldier," Aegon said. "Your speech is strange. Your eyes speak of a different world." Ned didn't flinch. "I know war," he said. "Do you know dragons?" "No, but I've seen what they leave behind." And with that, Aegon laughed. Not mockingly, not with cruelty, but with interest, curiosity. "You speak as though you've seen my end," Ned hesitated. "I've seen many ends, yours." "I don't know yet, that's it. That's the line that changes everything, because now Aegon doesn't see Ned as a threat. He sees him as a seer, a prophet, a man touched by the gods. And what does a man like Aegon do when he meets someone who claims to know the future? He listens, or he tests him. Ned is sent on a mission, alone south, to meet with Torrhen Stark, the king in the north, his own ancestor. Imagine that. Ned Stark, standing face to face with the man who would one day kneel and surrender the north to Aegon. But get this, it's not a meeting of politics. It's a test of identity, because Torrhen recognizes something strange in Ned, the way he speaks, the way he holds his blade, the way he knows names he shouldn't. You bear my name, Torrhen says, but you are not my son. I am your blood, Ned says. Prove it. This isn't just a political puzzle. It's a war of legacy. Ned must convince his own ancestor not to fight. Not out of fear, but because he knows the cost. He's seen it. The fire, the death, the madness that follows. But Torrhen is proud, stubborn, northern. Why should I trust a man who claims to be me? Ned steps forward, eyes burning. Because if you fight, you lose more than your crown. You lose the future. You lose us. Okay, hang on. How insane is this? Ned Stark is trying to alter the past by preserving it. He's not here to change everything. He's here to protect what must be, but will they listen? Will Aegon the dragon heed a direwolf's warning? Or will Ned have to do what he's always done? Sacrifice honor to save the realm. Because the clock is ticking, and war waits for no man. Not even one who fell through time. Not even one who fell through time. Torrhen Stark did not sleep the night after meeting the strange man who called himself Eddard. The north was cold even in summer, but that night felt colder. Something in the man's voice, his eyes, carried the weight of centuries yet to come. Torrhen had been called the king who knelt in whispers among his bannermen already. If he submitted to Aegon without a fight, what legacy would he leave? And yet Eddard's warning wasn't one of cowardice. It was a plea, not for power, for preservation. Ned stood at the gates of the encampment as dawn broke. The mist rolled like ghosts through the pine. A soldier handed him a water skin. He drank, but the taste brought back memories of Winterfell. Of Bran, of Jon, of standing in the Godswood, thinking he still had time. Now time itself had betrayed him, or maybe spared him. He wasn't sure which. He was summoned again, this time to stand before all the northern lords. They came with questions, with suspicions, with blades half-drawn. The Karstarks, the Umbers, the Boltons, each one proud, fierce, and unconvinced. Ned didn't beg. He spoke. "You think this is madness," he said. "A man falling from the future. I would think the same were I in your place. And yet you speak with knowledge of things you should not know," said Lord Umber. "You knew my father's death before I told it. You knew my brother's sword had broken. How?" "I lived through the echoes of your choices," Ned said simply. They watched him, not as a prophet, as a threat. Even the mention of dragons did little to sway them. They had never seen one. Aegon's conquest was still distant thunder on their horizon. But then Ned pulled something from beneath his cloak, a strip of black fur, the remnants of his Stark banner, half-burned. "This," he said, "was all that remained of Winterfell when dragons returned. A future not yet written, but coming. And unless you bend the knee, not out of fear but out of wisdom, you will never see that future." Silence. Then Torrhen stood. "Enough. If the gods sent this man to me, it was not for pageantry. It was for decision. And he made it. Not with certainty, not with ease, but with the burden every Stark bore. Protect the north. Even if it meant surrendering pride, he would kneel. But that decision rippled across the realm like wildfire. Back at Aegon's camp, Ned was welcomed not as a prisoner but as a diplomat. Aegon sat beside his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys, his black armor gleaming, his hand resting on Blackfire's hilt. "You convinced him," Aegon said. "Torrhen bends the knee." "I did what was necessary," Ned replied. Aegon's lips curled into a smile, not of amusement, but of something darker, calculation. "You serve the realm." "You said, 'I do.' Then serve me." That was the moment. The pivot point. Aegon didn't just want Ned as a messenger. He wanted him as a hand, a guide, a man of the future to help him shape the past. A kingdom ruled not only by fire but by foresight. Let's pause a second, because think about what this means. If Ned Stark becomes Aegon's closest advisor, then the entire conquest, the entire foundation of Westeros, gets rewritten. No mad kings. No rebellion, no Robert, no Daenerys, everything changes. Ned didn't answer immediately. "You are not the king I served," he said. "But I am the king you have," Aegon replied. "Damn, that line? That's not just power, that's prophecy in reverse." So Ned agreed, not to rule, not to scheme, but to protect, to influence, and from that day he became the ghost behind the throne. The one voice Aegon listened to when fire threatened to consume reason. And yet, even as Ned helped Aegon forge peace with some houses and crush others, he knew time was unstable. Every decision he made risked unraveling the very events that led to Jon Snow, to Arya, to everything he once fought for. The first true test came at Harrenhal. House Hoare had refused to surrender. The castle, a blackened stone monstrosity, stood as a symbol of resistance. Aegon planned to burn it to ash, but Ned had seen the ash. He'd walked through Winterfell after the dragons returned. He remembered the corpses, the stench, the silence of loss. He rode into Harrenhal alone. Lord Hoare met him with arrows trained on his chest. "A Targaryen's dog?" he sneered. "I am no man's dog," Ned said. "But I've seen what happens when fire forgets mercy." "Mercy?" Hoare laughed. "There is no mercy in dragons." "No," Ned said. "But there can be mercy in men," and somehow it worked. Ned offered terms, knowing that if he failed, Aegon would rain death within the hour. Hoare bent the knee. Aegon watched from a distance, standing beside Balerion. "You risked your life for one less pile of bones." "I risked it for the realm you want to build," Ned answered, and Aegon began to see. Conquest wasn't about destruction. It was about unity, legacy, future, but not everyone agreed. Visenya hated Ned. She called him a schemer, a false knight with a silver tongue. She watched him like a hawk. Rhaenys, softer, saw his grief. Asked him once if he had children. Ned only said, "A daughter who wanted to fly and a son who didn't know he already had." Rhaenys didn't ask again. Months passed. Kingdoms fell or surrendered. Ned stayed by Aegon's side, shaping history. But something strange began to happen. Visions, dreams. Ned would wake at night hearing Bran's voice, seeing Arya with blood on her hands. Jon standing in the snow, alone, sword drawn, eyes full of fire. Was time rejecting him, or calling him back? Then came the real test. The Reach House Gardener stood proud at Highgarden. 10,000 swords, an alliance with Dorne, a war brewing. Aegon prepared for the largest battle of his conquest. Ned begged for diplomacy. "Every man who dies here," he said, "could be the father of a future that never happens." But Aegon was resolute. "I gave them a choice. They chose defiance." Ned stood at the edge of the field as Balerion took flight, and that was the day of the Field of Fire. Thousands burned. The Reach was broken. House Gardener ended in flame. Ned watched powerless. That night he stood alone. "I failed," he whispered. "Again." But someone heard him. A figure stepped from the shadow. Pale, young, eyes full of knowing. Bran. Not the boy he remembered. "Something more. You were never meant to stay," Bran said. "Only to guide." "But I've changed everything," Ned whispered. "What if it all collapses?" "It already has," Bran said. "And yet, it still must happen. For Jon." And suddenly Ned understood. Jon. It had always been Jon, the child of ice and fire, the heir, the balance. Everything Ned had done, every battle, every word, every knee bent had been for Jon's future. "Will he know?" Ned asked. Bran smiled. "He already does." And then, light and winter fell. Snow fell gently. Ned was back, older, weary, alone. But something had changed. Aegon's dream lived on. Not in fire, in choice, and Jon would carry it, but only because a Stark once fell through time and reminded the dragon what it meant to be human. A month had passed since Eddard Stark returned to his own time, or what felt like it. Winterfell stood exactly as it always had, grey stone, cold halls, the scent of pine and snow in the air. But Ned was not the same man who had entered the crypts that night. Something inside him had shifted. A fire had been planted beneath all that northern frost. He couldn't explain where he had gone. Not to Maester Luwin, not to Catelyn, not even to Jon. It sounded mad, and yet the memories were real. The dragons, the fire, Aegon's sharp violet eyes, the roar of Balerion, the impossible now lived in his bones like a second soul. But there was one truth that rang louder than all the rest. Jon Snow, The boy had always been a mystery wrapped in silence. Now Ned knew why that silence had to remain. The child's future wasn't just important, it was the thread upon which Westeros itself might hang. Aegon's dream had not ended in fire. It had only just begun, and Jon would be the final verse. Let's pause here, because if your heart's racing, it should be. Ned Stark, having walked through time, advised the first king of Westeros, watched kingdoms fall to fire, had now returned with the most dangerous weapon of all, knowledge. And in the Game of Thrones, knowledge was worth more than armies. But remember, this isn't just a cool time travel plotline. This is a disruption, a paradox that shouldn't exist. And something or someone knew that, because 3 nights after his return, the dreams began. It started with whispers. Voices in the dark, then visions, blood spilling through snow, a wolf with burning eyes, and in the distance, a dragon crying out in agony, not pain but rage. At first Ned dismissed it, a ghost of fire left behind, but when Bran fell, when Catelyn screamed, and the Master said the boy might never wake, Ned knew it wasn't coincidence. He rode that night to the Godswood, falling to his knees before the old weirwood tree. "I have done what I should not have," he whispered. "I altered what was meant to be." And the gods in their silence answered. A raven landed nearby, 3-eyed, watching. You know what that means, right? Bran had begun his path to becoming the next thread in the tapestry of time. Whatever pulled Ned into the past had not released its grip on his bloodline. The magic was not done with the Starks. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the realm. In King's Landing, Varys received a raven with only 3 words. The wolf saw fire. He read it twice, burned the scroll and stared out toward the sea. In Dragonstone, a priestess of R'hllor stared into the flames and screamed as a face appeared. Eddard Stark, cloaked in shadow, walking beside a dragon. In the north, the wildlings spoke of strange lights beyond the wall, shapes that moved against the stars. And far, far in the east, in the ruins of Valyria, something ancient stirred. Let me ask you something. What happens when the past is rewritten, but the world keeps moving forward as if it wasn't? Because that's exactly what starts to happen. History itself begins to unravel. In Old Town, the Maesters find records that don't match, names of kings that shouldn't exist, a seal of House Gardner, over a date 2 centuries too late. The Archmeister says it's forgery, but one younger acolyte whispers, "What if time changed?" He's laughed out of the citadel, but he isn't wrong, because back in Winterfell, Jon begins having dreams, not just vague shadows. Clear ones. He sees dragons, the field of fire. A man that looks like him but older, standing beside Aegon, speaking his name. A sword, half ice, half flame, held high in his hand, he tells Ned. And Ned cannot lie. "It was me," he says, and Jon just stares. But how? Ned doesn't answer. Some truths are like wildfire, beautiful, terrifying, uncontrollable, but the truth has a way of spreading. Robb starts seeing it too. Arya has visions of kings long dead. Even Rickon speaks a name he should not know. Visenya and Bran. Bran begins to change. He speaks less, walks the halls at night, touches the roots of the weirwood like they whisper back. The past had not let go, because now comes the twist, the moment where the gods, or whatever force, governs this world, decides the timeline must correct itself. A rift opens in the far north, a tear in the fabric of magic itself. The wall shakes, the winds howl, and something slips through, not the White Walkers. Not yet, something worse, a man dressed in black armor, with silver hair, eyes like fire, Aegon. Not the Aegon Ned knew, this one is older, hardened and furious. He remembers a northern man appearing from nowhere, changing his conquest, altering history, planting seeds of mercy where fire should have burned, and he knows now that the dream he once had, the vision of a united realm, was tainted by that man. He has returned, not as a savior, but as a reckoning. Ned feels it before the raven arrives, a cold in his bones deeper than any northern wind. Then the letter comes. "I am Aegon of House Targaryen, and I have come for the wolf here." Let that settle for a moment. The founder of the realm, the Conqueror himself, dragged through time to chase the man who dared alter his destiny. You wanted a Game of Thrones twist? Here it is. Because now it's not just a story of dragons and thrones. It's a war between timelines, a clash of kings across centuries. Fire that remembers, ice that refuses to kneel, and Jon. Jon is caught in the middle. Ned gathers his family. "I do not ask you to fight for me," he says. "But what comes next may tear this world apart." Robb places a hand on his sword. "Then we fight for the world." And Arya just smiles. Sharp and silent. The final battle isn't in the past, it's here, now. In a Westeros where gods walk in dreams, dragons fly in memories, and one man's choice may decide the fate of time itself. Darkness fell over the north like a shroud. But this was no ordinary nightfall. The stars themselves seemed dimmer. The air tasted wrong, metallic, bitter, charged like the moment before a storm. And in the crypts of Winterfell, where the bones of the old kings of winter lay silent, a pulse echoed. Faint, measured, ancient. Ned stood in front of Lyanna's tomb, fingers grazing the cold stone. She would never know what he had done, what he had become. She would never see the boy she had died to protect become the center of something far larger than either of them could have imagined. Behind him, the raven from Aegon's camp sat perched on a broken spear. It watched, waiting. Jon stood in the doorway. "He's really coming, isn't he?" Ned didn't turn. "He's already here. Let that settle in your chest for a second." Aegon the Conqueror, the founder, the dragon who forged the realm in fire and blood, had returned. Not as the idealized king from legend. Not as the benevolent unifier, but as a man betrayed by time itself. A man robbed of his legacy, and now he wanted it back. Let's stop for a heartbeat. Because here's where it gets absolutely unhinged. The timeline wasn't meant to hold two Aegons. Two Neds. The threads were snapping. Magic, already thin in the world, was beginning to unravel. The weirwoods cried sap like blood. Ravens flew in spirals, disoriented. Melisandre felt the shift in the flames and fled eastward, whispering, "The past has returned to punish the present." In King's Landing, the sun set red as if the sky itself bled, and Aegon marched north, not with an army of men, but with something else. Remember those old Valyrian ruins? The ones even dragons feared. He had passed through them, and what came back with him weren't soldiers. They were creatures from the first doom, twisted by fire and magic. Silent, loyal only to him. He called them the Remnants, burnt-faced warriors who felt no pain. Wingless beasts with molten eyes, shadows that walked in daylight. Jon stared at the map of the north, the black tokens placed like seeds of death. "We can't win this. We're not supposed to," Ned said. Arya's voice cut through the room. "So we die?" "No," Ned replied. "We endure. Now ask yourself, what does endure mean to a Stark? It means sacrifice. It means honor buried beneath the snow. It means doing the unthinkable for the realm, even if the realm will never thank you for it." The Starks sent ravens. Robb marched south with the Manderleys and Karstarks. Sansa rode west to call banners from the mountains of the moon. Arya vanished as she always did, without a word. And Jon followed the only path left to him. He rode to the wall. Because if Aegon had used magic to cross time, to pull power from Valyria itself, then the answer wasn't in swords or fire. It was in the ancient things. The old gods. The things the Andals never understood. In the ruins of the Night Fort, Jon found something buried deep in the ice. Not a weapon. A gateway. A knot of magic older than Valyria. Older than men. Bran had seen it in dreams. Ned had spoken of it in riddles. Jon placed his hand on the stone, and the cold entered him like a breath. Across the world. Aegon stopped mid-step. He felt it too. The wolf had touched time. Now pause. This is the turning point. This is the fuse being lit. Because Aegon didn't just want revenge now, he wanted dominance over time itself. A future forged in his fire, shaped by his will. A realm where no Stark could whisper rebellion. No child could carry prophecy. No Jon Snow could exist. Back in Winterfell, Ned met with Maester Luwin and handed him a sealed letter. "If I fall," he said, "this must go to Samwell Tarly at the Citadel. He'll know what to do." "What does it contain?" "The truth," Ned said, "and instructions on how to end it, because that's the thing." The longer Ned stayed in this world, the more fragile time became. Bran had warned him. Every choice rippled, and the only way to stop the unraveling was to sever the thread, to send one of them back or kill them both. Now imagine this. Two men, the same bloodline, one forged in war, the other in regret. Both determined to save Westeros. In completely opposite ways, the battle didn't begin with fire. It began with silence. Aegon appeared outside Winterfell alone, clad in black armor laced with veins of red. Balerion was gone, vanished between the folds of time. He didn't need a dragon, he was one. Ned walked to the gates, sword in hand. Not ice, it was long gone, but a Stark blade still. A relic of the North, you changed me, Aegon said. Your mercy infected my legacy. I showed you a better path. You stole what was mine. I saved what could be. Aegon raised his hand, and the remnants emerged, dozens, hundreds, and behind Ned, the people of the North stood. But Jon wasn't among them, because he had crossed the wall, gone into the depths of what lay beyond, seeking the last heart tree. The only one that had seen the world before time. He knelt before it. I don't know what I am, but if I was born for a reason, show me. And the weirwood answered. Its roots shifted, its face wept blood, and Jon rose with eyes that glowed like winter stars. Now, back at Winterfell, the battle began. Screams, fire, steel. Robb cut down 2 remnants before one drove a blade through his side. Arya fought like wind, vanishing and reappearing, until a shadow struck her across the skull. Sansa stood at the walls, directing soldiers with a voice that had never shaken once. And Ned reached Aegon. Steel met steel. But time resisted them both. For every blow a vision of what had been, what could be, what must not happen. Children born and unborn, thrones shattered and reforged, snow covering fire, wolves and dragons howling together. Aegon faltered. We could fix it all, he said. Ned pressed the blade to his throat. You already did, by dying. But before he could strike, a burst of light. Jon stood between them, and in his hand, Lightbringer, not a sword of fire, a sword of balance. Half Valyrian steel, half carved from weirwood root, forged by destiny, and he made the choice no one else could. He drove it through time itself. The scream that followed wasn't human, wasn't dragon, wasn't mortal. It was the cry of the world being. Rewritten. Aegon fell, the remnants vanished, and Ned collapsed as time closed its wound, and the future resumed. But here's the question. Did Jon save the world, or did he become its final mistake? Silence fell over Westeros, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that lingers after a scream. After the fabric of the world has been stretched to the breaking point, and then stitched back together with trembling hands. Winterfell stood, but not as it was. The walls were scorched in places where time itself had cracked. Some stones had aged 1,000 years overnight. Others shimmered with unnatural cold. Snow fell upward for an hour before it corrected itself. The godswood no longer whispered. It watched. Ned Stark awoke 3 days after the final blow, his body broken, breath shallow but alive. Alive in the way a man survives a drowning. Not saved, but spit back out. He saw Jon sitting by his bedside, gaunt, pale, with a weight in his eyes that no young man should carry. You ended it, Ned said. Jon didn't answer at first. His hands were stained, not with blood, but something older. The residue of magic, of fate. I don't know what I ended, he finally said, but I don't think it's over. Hold up. Did that give you chills? Because yeah, Jon Snow didn't just kill Aegon the Conqueror. He pierced time itself, and now, something ancient has noticed. Let's rewind just a moment, because the moment that blade entered the rift, Westeros changed. Not visibly, not immediately. But the threads that bound the past, present, and future, they tangled. Ravens began to speak in full sentences. Children were born with silver hair in families with none. The Citadel recorded 5 eclipses in 1 week, and far beyond the shivering sea, in the black halls of Ashai, the shadows danced for the first time in centuries. Something was coming. Back at Winterfell, Ned could walk again slowly. He joined his children at the hall. Robb's wound had closed, but he limped and his gaze was distant. Arya had a scar down her face, but she smiled more now. Sansa stood taller than before, issuing commands to rebuild, her voice like stone. But Jon kept staring north. They're waiting, he said one night. Who? Ned asked. The ones who kept time, that's the twist, isn't it? Because it wasn't just magic that brought Ned back. It wasn't just Bran's visions or weirwood roots whispering. There's something deeper in the world. A force that lives between seconds, that watches the past and future like we read a book. And now that Jon has rewritten a page, they're coming to tear the whole book apart. The dreams begin again, Not for Ned this time. For all of them. Sansa dreams of a throne made of ice, screaming. Arya sees herself stabbing someone she loves. Robb sees his own funeral again and again. And Jon sees himself becoming something else. Not a king. Not a hero. A gate. He stands on the edge of a cliff in his sleep, staring into a void, and the void stares back. He tells Bran, who has barely spoken since the battle. Bran only says, "The tree remembers." The tree wants. What does it want? Jon asks. Bran turns slowly. To finish the story. Because that's the price of tampering with time. You don't just change the past, you invite the future to come. Sooner. The long night begins early. The wall doesn't fall this time, it just vanishes, gone, like it was never there. A storm spreads from the far north. Not just snow, memory. Whole villages forget who they are. Men wake up with no names. Castles lose their histories. Maesters tear out pages they can no longer read. Something is erasing. Westeros, and it's not the Night King, not the White Walkers, it's something older. The children of the forest called it the unraveling, a force that comes when timelines break and the world tries to fix itself by unmaking what went wrong. And Jon is at the center, not as a warrior, as the wound. Ned gathers the council. We have to go. North. Robb slams his fist. With what army? We're not going to fight, Ned says. We're going to give it back. Sansa whispers, give what back? Ned turns to Jon. Him, stop, breathe, let that hit. Ned knows the truth now. Jon isn't just a prince, not just a child of prophecy. He's the paradox born from a rewritten past, the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, in a world that was meant to forget them. Protected by a man who stepped through time. Given knowledge too early, power too soon, and the only way to fix it is to unmake it. Jon stands. Then I'll go. Arya jumps up. Not alone, Bran speaks again. You can't go alone. You won't come back, and that's the plan. A journey beyond the wall. A last march, to give Jon back to time. But here's where the story fractures. As they prepare to leave, a new player enters the game, a woman dressed in robes blacker than night. Her skin is grey. Her eyes are violet. Her voice is cold. She calls herself Nysaria, the one who remembers. She claims to be from Valyria, but not the Valyria of history. A Valyria that burned a second time, she says. A timeline that was erased. Because you saved Aegon, you spared too much. She points at Ned. You made the realm kind. That was never meant to be. Then, at Jon, you were never meant to exist, and she makes an offer. Let me take your place, she says to Jon. Let me become the gate. I've lived 1,000 erased years. I know how to bleed them back into truth. Jon refuses, and she smiles. Then I'll take it from you. That night Winterfell burns, not by fire, by memory. Walls vanish, rooms reshape. Ghosts walk again. Jon is taken. Ned is wounded again. Worse this time. Too deep. Bran vanishes. Arya watches it all and feels helpless for the first time in her life. And Sansa is left with one message. Carved in the stone of the broken Great Hall, only death closes the loop. Now the race begins to find Jon, to reach the edge of the world before the unraveling does, to end the paradox. Or to become gods in the process. Snow fell black that morning. Not soot, not ash, snow, but touched by something darker, something ancient, as if the sky itself had started to forget what it meant to be pure. The air no longer smelled of winter. It smelled of endings, of undone histories and names whispered out of order. Sansa stood atop the broken battlements of Winterfell, her hair caught in the wind, her eyes on the fading line of figures disappearing into the eye. North Jon was gone, taken, and what remained of her family, the only blood she had left, was preparing to walk into death to bring him back. Arya sharpened her blades in silence, the stone rhythm broken only by her breath. She hadn't spoken since the fire, since Ned had collapsed in front of her, gasping his last words before slipping into unconsciousness. Again. This time, he hadn't woken. Bran was missing. No trace, not even ravens could find him. And when the weirwood trees were asked, they said only one thing. He walks where no roots grow. And the sky cracked that night. The stars blinked. And all over Westeros, people forgot. Not just random things, names, places. Entire bloodlines were erased in an instant. In the Vale, the Arryns became strangers to their own banners. In dawn, Sunspear was swallowed in fog. In the citadel, books turned blank as if the ink had never touched parchment. Time wasn't breaking anymore. It was being erased. Let me ask you something. How do you fight something you can't see? Something that doesn't kill you but erases you. This isn't a war, it's a slow, cruel undoing, and Jon Snow is the center of it all, held in a place that does not exist on any map. A location whispered in the tongues of the children of the forest. A temple carved into the bones of the world itself, known only as the Loop. It was here that Nysaria had taken him, and it was here that time would either close or collapse forever. Let's jump into the impossible. Inside the Loop, time doesn't move forward. It spirals. Memories float like mist. Whole scenes replay themselves. Jon watches his own birth 10 times in one breath. He sees Ned cradling him, Lyanna begging, and then he sees himself. Not the man he was, not the boy from the wall, but a version of himself crowned in shadow. Fire behind his eyes, a crown of swords bleeding. He blinks, it vanishes. Nysaria appears. You see now, she says. You are not a man. You are a scar. Jon doesn't flinch. Then why haven't you erased me? She smiles, cold, almost kind. Because even scars can be useful. They remind the world of pain. But here's the twist. Nysaria isn't the villain, not entirely. She's a fragment of time. A memory that survived a destroyed reality. One where the Targaryens never fell. Where the dragons ruled unchallenged. Where mercy was a disease. That world was erased by Aegon's change of heart. By Ned's interference, she was left behind, and now she wants to restart everything. Not to punish Jon, but to restart the world without him. I offer you freedom, she says. Let me erase you. And this ends. But Jon has seen too much. He knows now the cycle never ends. The wheel doesn't break, it just spins faster. And so, he says the one thing that seals everything. No, I'll close it myself. At that exact moment, Arya reaches the Loop. She shouldn't be able to. No one should. But she's not no one. She's no one. And she doesn't walk through time. She kills it. With every step, memory dies. Her father's voice, her mother's laugh. Her own childhood. But she keeps going, because this isn't about her, it's about Jon. She finds him in the center of the Loop, his body half frozen, half burning. Nysaria lunges, Arya blocks. Steel clashes against fate, and outside, beyond the magic, Sansa lights the last fire in the Godswood, whispering the names of every Stark, every ancestor, every king who had once stood in the snow. She doesn't know if it'll matter, but she remembers, and that's the key, because that's how the unraveling ends, not with death, with memory. Jon stands, Arya by his side, Sansa's voice echoing through time. He takes the blade, Lightbringer reborn, and does the one thing time never expected. He forgives it. I accept what I am, Jon says. I accept who we were. Who we will be! All of it, and time. Blinks, the unraveling halts. Nysaria screams. Not in pain, but in disbelief. You chose to keep the wound. No, Jon says. I chose to live with it. The Loop cracks, time begins again, not reset, healed. Back in Winterfell, Ned Stark wakes up, he breathes. Whispers Jon's name. Outside, Bran returns. Walking, whole, eyes older than the moon. Arya walks into the hall, covered in snow. And memory, Sansa smiles for the first time in weeks. And Jon? Gone, not dead. Remembered everywhere. A song begins. Not one sung by bards. Not written in books, but in the roots. The trees. The bones of the land. A song of time. Of wolves. Of fire. Of a boy who was never meant to be, but was always meant to save. And as the snow falls, white again, one raven flies, carrying the final message. The Loop is closed. The realm endures, and if that didn't give you chills, watch it again. Give you chills, watch it again.